Welcome, everyone, to the Israel Inspiration Initiative. This is an initiative in cooperation with Nefesh B'Nefesh, Mizrachi, National Council of Young Israel, and CSY. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. A special thanks goes to Rabbi Torczyner, as well as Rabbi Goller and Michael Mandelstam, who actually helped us pull together this very important agenda. So I'd like to thank each one of you here who has joined us. We had 175 registrants to this webinar. Each one of you are kind of in a different stage of thinking about Aliyah. Some of you are ready to jump on the plane right now. Others are thinking about submitting a tik to Nefesh B'Nefesh, and yet others are thinking about what does it really mean to make Aliyah, and what impact will have it on my family. This is probably one of the most important decisions that you will make. Not only are you affecting your life and your children's life, but you're affecting your grandchildren's and every generation hereafter. You have an opportunity of joining Klal Yisrael in shaping the future of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael. We have been privileged in living in a very special times, a miraculous times. What we accomplished in the past 76 years is unprecedented in the history of the world. And you have an opportunity to be a participant in creating that history. What I'd like to do right now is quickly go through the agenda of what we'll be talking about the next hour and a half. We're going to start out with some words from two of the major community rabbis, Rabbi Torczyner and Rabbi Goller, followed by words of inspiration from Rabbi Judah Mischel. One of the most important presentations is raising a family in Eretz Yisrael, and Dr. Agatstein will be addressing that area. Talking about children education is extremely important, both primary school education and high school education. Rav Freedman from Ramat Beit Shemesh will be talking about primary education, and Ariela Davis will be focusing in on high school education. Employment is a key item, and Michael asked me to focus in on the healthcare professionals, and Dr. Marcus will be talking about what does it mean to be a healthcare professional in Eretz Yisrael. Choosing communities is also one of the very important decisions that you'll have to make. And we have four special speakers. Rafi Shulman will be talking about an overview from what does it mean to choose a community. Rabbi Golden will be talking about an exciting project that Mizrachi and Young Israel National have two rabbis from two communities. Rabbi Felberg from Harish, it's a growing community. And then in the more community, Rabbi Sobol will be talking about Modi'in. Healthcare in Eretz Yisrael is very important, especially for retirees. And Dr. Aaron will be talking about some of the differences between healthcare in the United States and healthcare in Eretz Yisrael. The next presentation will be Rabbi Ginsberg, who will be talking about NCSY. Many of you are familiar with NCSY. Is really focusing in on the American children who made Aliyah and how to help them integrate into Israeli society and create a social network, among themselves. And last but not least is Marc Rosenberg, who from Nefesh B'Nefesh, who will give us some tips about applying a tik for Aliyah, as well as answering many questions that have been submitted so far. We will then, if we have time, to have a question and answer period. So please, if you do have a question, please submit it on the Zoom page to you directly, and we'll be creating those questions and answers on that WhatsApp group. So without further ado, let me pass the torch.
Paul, you there? Okay, so the rabbis, if you want to take it from here, I think we might have lost him for a little bit, but it's you're up.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. It's an honor. to speak here, to speak for this, for Aliyah, to speak on a panel with Rabbi Goller. Aliyah has always been very close to my heart, but probably no more so than the last couple of weeks, since a daughter of mine made Aliyah on August 28th with the help of Nefesh B'Nefesh. So very happy to be able to speak. And during my 14 years in Toronto before moving to West Hempstead, I was a Rosh Kollel of a Torah Mitzion and YU Kollel, and I was based in a school called Bnei Akiva Schools, the only branch of Yeshivot Bnei Akiva outside of Israel. So I talked a lot about Zionism and about Aliyah, and a frequent question was whether there is a halachic imperative to make Aliyah. So if you want to talk about it on a technical level, I can certainly show support for Aliyah as a mitzvah. Whether it's the pasuk that says "V'horashtem es haaretz v'yishavtem ba," you're supposed to conquer the land, you're supposed to settle in it, which Ramban considers to be a biblical mitzvah. Whether it's the Gemara in Ksubos at the end that says that in a family, if one of the spouses wants to have the family move to Israel, they can compel the other spouse to move. Whether it's the Rambam writing that you're not supposed to leave Israel other than for particular purposes. But the truth is, when you start getting into sources and trying to argue technical obligations, you could also show other readings of each source. You could show sources that indicate that it's not a halachic obligation, the best known being that the Rambam doesn't list it in his 613. To me, the technical isn't really the point. We don't only do the things that we do in life and as Jews for technical reasons. To me, the imperative for Aliyah does not come from the question of, is there a specific halachic obligation, as much as who do I want to be as a Jew? And toward that end, I want to bring two short passages from Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, which speak to the value of living in Israel in broader terms. One is from an essay of his called Diaspora, Religious Zionism, Some Current Reflections. And he describes how he first came to Israel during the summer of 1962. And he went to visit his Rebbe, Rav Yitzchak Hutner, who was there for the summer. And he writes the following. He, Rav Hutner, began to question me regarding my impressions, particularly about what had struck my notice especially. As at that stage I had focused upon the Torah world in Israel, I noted a number of phenomena which had struck me favorably as compared to the American scene. Widespread popular Torah study, the interaction of the Torah in general communities, and the implementation of Choshen Mishpat, business law. Every reply was rebutted with the comment that its subject could have been found in Eastern Europe as well, and so was neither endemic nor unique to Israel. When he sensed that I had exhausted my material, he pressed on, inquiring as to what indeed was special about my visit. And when it became clear that I could at best only respond feebly, the Rosh Yeshiva opened with a volley of sources and dicta, and he goes on to describe Israel as the land that Hashem cares about, the land Moshe and Aaron wanted to get into and were not allowed into, this land which was now open to us. And I'm quoting Rav Aaron here, all trumpeting forth the sacral, metaphysical, and historical uniqueness of the land. It's the holiness of the land. It's the metaphysical aspect of a Jew being there. It's this being the land of our ancestors, the birthplace of the Jewish people, the place where we lived and functioned. And in a separate essay, Rav Aaron speaks additionally about this, and he talks about coming to Israel and moving to Israel and joining what he calls the socio-historical reality of the Jewish people. You join Jewish history and you join the Jewish nation as a whole. And to me, that's it. That's the compelling argument among many arguments for why we should, all be striving to be there. Not everybody is able to move there right now. There are very good reasons why people remain outside: family needs, financial issues, health matters. But for those who are able to go, I don't think it's a technical issue. It's joining the Jewish people and joining Jewish history in this place where a Jew can fully live as a Jew, religiously, socially, historically, on every plane.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. And let me pass the microphone over to Rabbi Goller.
Good Vach, Shavua Tov. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I want to thank Paul and Michael for organizing an amazing conversation this morning, and it is a conversation. It's a kavod to be listed among such chashuv presenters and rabbanim. Really, I'm not sure I actually deserve to be. I'm not saying that humbly. I'm actually saying that honestly, for two reasons. Number one, because the amazing presenters we have, and number two, because I myself am in the same struggle everyone else is, which is toying with the notion of heading toward Israel versus staying in the diaspora. I want to just briefly tell one story that really made an impression upon me many, many years ago that I think speaks to the importance of the conversation this morning. And actually, I'm going to quote Paul's own daughter, Tova Schaefer. Thank you for the insight in terms of what the importance of our conversation this morning. One of the most prolific and highlighted figures in the religious Zionist movement in the 20th century, Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Charlap Zatzal, the Rosh Yeshiva of Merkaz Harav, and the famed Talmud of Rav Kook Zatzal. And Rabbi Charlap, who just recently passed away from YU, his grandfather, who was a phenomenal Talmud Chacham and also person of incredible passion for Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. And the story was told. There's a few iterations of it, so pardon me, I'm taking one iteration of the story. The story is told that as he got older, he died in 1951. So as he got older, and it was hard for him to walk back and forth to yeshiva, certain talmidim, certain students were assigned to do so. And as he got more frail in his old age, he died at the age of 69, did not have the zechus of Arichas Yamim there in Israel. There was a concern that at the time it's hard for us to imagine, myself included. We visit Israel and see Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh, and we see beautiful apartments and buildings and shrubbery and wide streets. Imagine in those days the streets were dirt roads and the buildings were nothing. It was just empty lots. So he didn't see the Yerushalayim that we see today. And there was major construction going on, hammering and jackhammering and digging all throughout the day. And there was a discussion with the family and the students to figure out if the Rav has to rest in order to go back to yeshiva, maybe we should ask the workers to curtail their efforts earlier in the afternoon so the Rav can rest, or Bechalab can rest for the day's schedule for the next day in yeshiva. Apparently, he overheard this conversation with his family and some of the students, and he said to them as follows. He said, I look around and I imagine all of you are younger than I am, and you will see, God willing, very soon, a built-up Yerushalayim, a built-up Israel. You see tall buildings, you'll see people, you'll see wide roads, you'll see infrastructure, you'll see businesses, hotels, you'll see all of it. I'm not going to see it. Realistically, let me at least have the zechus to hear it. Let me hear the hammers. Let me hear the jackhammer. Let me hear the digging. That itself gives me the chizuk, the strength to envision for myself a future for our people in our sacred holy land of Israel. Let me hear the digging, hear the future, the building of Am Yisrael in Medinat Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. And I think that story always reminded me that part of our task as Jews in diaspora is, of course, we're not zoche to see daily the building and the roads being paved towards the future of our people in Israel. We're here thousands of miles away. But the importance of hearing, of listening to conversations, listening to noises, listening to news outlets, listening to people who are there, listening to their stories individually, communally, that's powerful to listen to that. It gives us chizuk. As Rabbi Chalap so beautifully said, to envision for ourselves what our future could be like in the land of Israel. Part of the goal this morning, as Paul said so poignantly, is many of us are on different pages here. Some of us are planning imminently to move to Israel in the next few months or a year. Some of us are looking for job opportunities as soon as we can. Some of us maybe don't have the tools right now to be able to plan so close a few months or a year, but we're planning years down the line, whatever our timeline is, just to be able to hear with our ears that there's a strong and bright future, a vibrant future for us ourselves, our people in the land of Israel, it's important for our ears to keep listening to such conversation. And the goal this morning really is that. Tova Schaefer shared with me that part of her family's interest in moving to Israel is simply because she heard her parents growing up in her house having real conversations about the practicalities, about their plans. How can they make it work to make Aliyah? Have every household, whether it's imminent or not, just join the conversation, make it part of the daily, weekly, monthly, yearly dialogue in a home. That's the goal of this meeting today. We should all be part of a conversation in planning our trajectory towards the goal of living in Israel and be inspired by those sounds of digging and building, whether it be for careers, whether it be towards apartments, whatever it may be. But hearing and listening to conversations is what it's all about, to inspire and to keep the fire in us alive towards the goal of landing and living in the land of Israel. And so I thank you again for the opportunity to share just a little insight and hopefully being part of the conversation. I look forward to Mirza Hashem to joining many more conversations and Mirza Hashem in inspiring myself to continue to listen and be inspired by those who have made Aliyah or planning Aliyah, and God willing, hopefully being part of the movement, the important movement towards moving our entire people towards our sacred promised land of Medinat Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael. Thank you all so much again.
Thank you very much, rabbis, for your very wonderful words. Let me pass it on to Rabbi Judah Mischel, who is the head of HESC. Rabbi Mischel?
Hi, how are you? Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Shabbat Tov. Not just my professional that I work at Camp HESC is wonderful. It's great, but I think that the bigger deal is that we've been living in Ramat Beit Shemesh, which is somewhere between Sora and Eshtaol. That's the way that it's described in the Navi for the past 23 years over here now, and I can just say that this is an amazing get together. This is really something awesome. Everybody faces toward Eretz Yisrael when they daven, but usually when the siddur gets closed and everybody kind of goes their own way after davening, we kind of dig into where we are and what we're focused on. So this is really a very beautiful thing, and thank you everybody for the privilege to be able to be a part of this. I'll just one word. B'shut HaRabbanim and all the wonderful people who are here, all the professionals who are really the ones who I think should be the ones speaking here today, because you want to get practical. Is that a number of years ago when Rav Eitam Henkin Hashem Yikom Damo and his wife were gunned down, when his mom went to visit his parents sitting Shiva, the Henkins, and Rabbanit Henkin, who's really one of the great visionaries and builders of Torah in the world today. It was a lot of people there, and it was like a very intense kind of a shiva. But one of the more extraordinary moments was when she kind of posed the questions to the crowd. She's a master educator, so she kind of posed the question to the crowd and asked, everyone who was assembled, how many svarim in Tanakh there are. And everybody kind of sat quietly. No one really wanted to say. Is it a rhetorical question? I mean, she's sitting shiva over her son. She obviously had something she wanted to say. Finally, she looked around and went like this, no. And somebody piped up and said, there's 24 Chavdal in Sefer Tanakh. And she said, you were right. You used to be right. There were 24 books of Tanakh, and now we're writing a 25th. And in the midst of a very challenging, very painful experience, lo aleinu, of burying son and daughter killed by terrorism, she was able to see a bigger picture. And the fact that this meeting, this Zoom, is taking place, everything here in Israel is in the shadow of, or in the context of, or through the lens of Simchas Torah, October 7th, is really very inspiring. It's a response and it's a reaction that I think every single Jew believes deep down inside that we are living in historic times and special times, prophetic times, and that the call to build the future of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael is something that we all want to be a part of. And Ashreinu, that we're able to be part of. How that's going to happen, I don't know. The Dubna Magod once said famously that if you have a certain goal and you want to accomplish, there's different ways of going about it. We could start gathering facts and start gathering strategies and do our best and try to hopefully get to where we want to get to. But he said, or you could also just and then hopefully, maybe you'll get it, maybe we won't, maybe we'll hit the target, maybe we won't. He said, really just shoot against the wall and then paint the target around where you shot, and that way we'll get there. I feel like the question of how to do this and the details are all obviously critical and very important, and to make all the proper hishtadlos, and you'll hear from the experts, and God willing, everyone will continue doing all their research and all their investing their time and energies to figure out the right way to make a parnasa and take care of their family and find the right community. But what this gathering today is about is kind of reminding ourselves that all of those circles that we're going to paint on the wall really are around the bottom line, the target of expressing a desire to be in Eretz Yisrael and facing the Holy Land, not just when we daven, but in everything that we're doing. What Torczyner mentioned, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, I once heard quote from his shver, from his father-in-law of Soloveitchik, that when it comes to attaching oneself to the community of Jews in Eretz Yisrael, we talk a lot about yearning. Not just enough to yearn over the land, but also to consecrate yearning into pragmatic and practical, concrete ways. And having a Zoom like this is definitely setting us on that right path, about consecration of yearning. Rabbi Nachman says that Eretz Yisrael is not just a place. It's not just a destination, not just a goal, but it really expresses in every way the essence of what it means to be a Jew. Eretz Yisrael is made up of the letters Aleph Resh Tzadik, which is Ani Rotzeh. When we want to express our Yiddishkeit in its ultimate form, not just as daveners or as learners or as mitzvah observers, but to expand our experience as Jews to every single facet of our existence, in the economy, and in a community, and in an army, and in the most basic fundamental expression of land and societally. The only place that can really unfold and take place is in Eretz Yisrael. And every one of us wants to be a Jew and wants to express our Yiddishkeit and wants to manifest our Yiddishkeit and our Torah life and living in our Judaism in its greatest form. Yehi Ratzon may be that we have the opportunity and the privilege and the schus to consecrate all of this yearning in very practical terms, both through the individuals who are going to be sharing about all the different practical sides of consideration here in community life and in family life and in educational life and professional life. But it should be that Hashem sees all of this as a great expression of yearning. And Mirz Hashem will all be able to write ourselves into this last chapter of Tanakh, this next amazing phase of Jewish history. And Mirz Hashem to be signed and sealed for a sweet year, a healthy year, a good year, a year of moving the ball forward in Jewish history, Bechlal, and for us specifically, and our loved ones, Befrat. And it should be a Ksiv Chesima Tova, and a good Keben Shtior here in Eretz Yisrael and all around the world. And Mirz Hashem will all be able to share good news here together.
Thank you very much, Mischel. Our next speaker is, what does it mean to really raise a family in Eretz Yisrael? So Dr. Agatstein, it's all yours.
Hi, thank you. My name is Ariela Agatstein, and I want to start off by telling you a little bit about myself, and then we'll talk about what it means to really raise a family here in Israel. I want to preface just by saying that there is so much to say. I selected a few things to speak about over the course of the next 6 minutes. But if any of you have any questions at the end of this webinar, certainly I know that the people in charge can give you my email address, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. So we moved to Israel, like I said, 6 years ago. I'm originally from Teaneck. My husband is from Los Angeles, and we actually moved. We were living in LA for almost 10 years. And Baruch Hashem, we had a great life. We My kids were really happy in school. Baruch Hashem. My husband had a great job. I had a great job. We owned a home. We, had our cars. We had our friends and community, and we were very, very involved in our community. And for many years, while I was beginning that journey of raising my children in Los Angeles, I was sort of living a chetzi life, because there was something inside that no matter how much we were accomplishing in Chutz La'aretz, there was a part of me that felt, I call it like a hole inside of me that I felt, is this really the end goal? And for me, and again, everyone is different. But for me, I was living chetzi because every year when big milestones would come up, or questions or decisions, it was sort of, well, if we move then to Israel, or if we try to move to Israel, then we'll do this. But if not, then, and we end up staying here, then we'll do this. And, those types of decisions kept coming up, and we were living a chetzi life. And it was my daughter's bat mitzvah, my eldest. She was at, Baruch Hashem, I have 6 children, 4 that were born in America, 2 that were born here. And then just basically, we decided we didn't want to live a chetzi life. Like, either we were going to take the jump and move. And it was definitely, it always is a jump. I always tell people, no matter how prepared you are, you're moving across the world. Baruch Hashem, it's to Israel and to the Jewish homeland, but it's always a jump. And at the time, my 12-year-old said to me, like, she wasn't angry at all, but she said, like, Mommy, why are you ruining my life? And the truth is that I said to her, I'm not ruining your life. And, we spoke about it. And she said, no, I do want to go, but like, all my friends are here, and like, I'm going to make all new friends. Like, I'm going to learn Hebrew. Like, you really think I'm going to learn Hebrew? And I can tell you that Baruch Hashem, this is now 6 years later, and that bat mitzvah girl is now almost 19 years old. And she thanks me every single day. B'li ayin hara, Baruch Hashem, all my children, they thank us. Thank you for moving us to Israel. It was the best thing you could have done for our family. So I wanted to start off with that. What are some of the positives that I see in terms of raising our children in Israel? So first of all, obviously, it's really every day you're fulfilling so many different nivuot. It says in Zechariah, right? Od yeshvu zkenim uzkenot berchovot Yerushalayim. It's a famous pasuk, right? That the elderly men and women will be in the squares of Yerushalayim. But the end part, the next pasuk says, U'rechovot ha'ir himal'u yeladim v'yeladot mitzachakim berechovoteha. And the squares of the city will be crowded with boys and girls playing in the squares. And I really think of this pasuk all the time. On Shabbos, it happens, I live in Yerushalayim, and that's important to note given the points I'm going to be making. But really, I see children playing in the streets of the capital of the Jewish homeland, and there is nothing that gives me more pride. And I feel like I really live that zechut every single day. Another point I want to bring up is really that I feel that comparing my life pre and post Aliyah, that my children, and also certainly for myself and my husband, that there's a certain, cohesiveness to your Jewish identity that can only happen living here. When I'm talking to my children over the course of a day, we're talking about Rehov Ramban, Rehov Rav Sadia Gaon, Ben Maimon, these are names of Gedolim, and they're at the tips of my children's tongue, or whether you're living in a place like Modi'in, or whether you're living in Ranana, or wherever you are, these are names of tzaddikim. But also when my children go on school trips, I always tell people, my background is education. I know you'll be hearing a lot about education today. I was actually an assistant principal of a major school in Los Angeles. My children's school trips are seeing the beauty of this holy homeland. And when they're learning something in Navi, and to be able to go to that location and to open the Tanakh and to learn it there's nothing like it in the world. And the best part is that we don't have to say goodbye. It's not like, we're coming on a trip and then we have to leave. It's the day in, day out. It's the ebbing and the flowing of just life among our people. And I think it's something that we really appreciate on a day-to-day basis. Another positive thing that I always tell people about is really that I love it that my children are so independent. I know all of their friends are as well. They're able to traverse the country if they wanted to, by train, by bus. They know things. They get it. They know how to go camping. When they have Yol Shnatis in school, they are going and there's this salt of the earth approach. It's wholesome, and you're getting in touch with the land itself. And they have this connection to Eretz Yisrael that is just incredible. And it's something that we appreciate every day. And also that I think in this country, what differs very strongly between here and let's say the United States is that in America, the school day is much, much longer. There's a lot of homework and book reports and projects. So certainly in elementary school here, school ends early. And the approach educationally, which you'll hear a lot more about later, which I'm only touching upon for one moment, is just that children are meant to be children, and that the view here is that we want children to be involved in Tnuat Noar, which means youth movements. And if you are someone who is Dati Leumi or Dati Leumi Torani, then on Tuesdays, your school will end early, typically because the expectation is that you're going to sign your children up for chugim, for extracurricular activities. So it might mean that those activities are offered at your local community center or in school, but the country wants you to develop yourself as a child and as a teenager in so many different ways and to be multifaceted. And again, like I said before, Tnuat Noar. So that means, again, if you are Dati Leumi, if you are, what America would call, let's say, modern Orthodox or Dati Leumi Torani, so you would be involved in Bnei Akiva or Ezra or Ariel. And if you're older, then you would be involved in something like NTSY, which I know other people are going to be speaking about later today as well. Really quickly, I just want to touch upon a couple of challenges you might face. And again, if there are any other questions afterwards, please feel free to contact me. As a parent, if you are a parent and you're deciding, whether or not to move to Israel, there's a lot of questions that come up. Religiously, sort of, where is your outlook and what do you want for your family and what are your goals? And I tell people all the time, it's a great idea to sort of find someone who you think is religiously aligned to you in some way and ask their advice. Even if you don't end up living in their community, they might have a sense of what type of communities might be for you, what type of schools for your children might be appropriate. Another challenge that might come up would be, let's say, living in a city versus living in a yeshuv. I live in a city. I live in Yerushalayim, and I feel so lucky that I live in this place, which has the heartbeat of Am Yisrael, literally, right? Like some of my children in my family, they're at the Kotel every single week. And we have Machane Yehuda, and we have Ben Yehuda, and all these things which are amazing. But the flip side is that there's complexity in raising your children in a city. And the opposite sort of might be, one could say, true in terms of raising your child in a yeshuv. It's definitely quieter, and there's a certain level of more shieldedness in a certain way that might exist. So these are all cheshbonot, things that you would have to consider, and they are really important decisions. Definitely the work-life balance with children here is different. I was working full-time my entire life before making Aliyah. And then once we moved, now I also work, honestly, I also work very full-time. But for the first couple of years here, it really, being a stay-at-home parent also was very different than, let's say, one might experience when you're not in Ola or Ola. And so the amount of time that I think your kids need you to sort of be on top of things because there's so much that's new. I think there definitely comes with an adjustment period. And knowing that there is that adjustment period, I think is sort of validating. And if you have questions about that, I'm happy to answer again via email. And the last thing I just want to point out is just that Israel is not America. So when we first came here, I mean, I'm sharing something now for my own self, but it's very easy to look over your shoulder and to believe and to keep saying wait, when I was in fourth grade, my English teacher was, they were giving me book reports. Or when I was in fourth grade, we had Parsha projects every single week, or whatever your experience was in terms of either raising your children or being a student in America might be one thing. And then when you come here, it is something different. And the focus of the educational system is different. And I think it's important to note it's not America, and not to look over your shoulder at what are my the children, my children's age, what are they doing right now? I think it's important to embrace the system and be able to find your way of working within that educational system. And then the last thing is just my last point is just that Be'ezrat Hashem, for those of you who do come here, I think it's important to tell our kids also that it's okay to feel a lot of different things about Aliyah at the beginning, and even not at the beginning. So on the one hand, your kids might be thrilled that you live in Israel, but it's also okay to miss certain things about America. And that's healthy and that's normal. And I think as parents, when we really validate our children's feelings and we say, yeah, you know what, I do miss, grandma, grandpa, or Bubby Zadie, or whoever it might be. And I do miss Target, and I do miss whatever it might be, or the summer camp that you went to, which maybe you do or don't go to anymore. Like, it's okay to say, yeah, those things are great. You're right. But I think one doesn't take place, it's not like it has to be an either or situation. Anyway, I know this was the tip of the iceberg. I hope it helps anyone. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agatstein. Our next presentation is really about education, which Ariela touched on. And we have two leading educators. We'll start off with Rabbi Freedman. Rabbi Freedman. Okay, if we don't have Rabbi Free, he was there before.
Want to he's here. Do you want to have Ariela Davis start, and then I can?
Okay, Ariel, why don't you start? So Ariel's going to really talk about the high school environment for American children who make Aliyah.
Okay, the first thing you learn when you move to Israel, I can't say American anymore. Right now it's Anglo. So I guess. Okay, I also want to just share that I wasn't thinking about saying this before, but when Ariela Agatstein said that you really have your kids seeing street names named after Tanaim, Amuraim, I'm thinking about on Shabbos. One Shabbos, my husband was giving a Dvar Torah, and he quoted Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and three of my kids looked at each other and they said, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, because that's the name of a street from Beit Shemesh that they hear on the bus all the time. And it's a bus stop to them, but that's really what it is in Israel, that really the street names are even the Zionist founders and Tanaim and everything in between. Okay, so when we made Aliyah 4 years ago, a little, already into our 4th year, so people told me do not make Aliyah with teenagers. My oldest was going into Kita Tet, into 9th grade. I had one afterward going to 7th grade. And then afterward, younger children, everyone said, do not make Aliyah with teenagers. They go off the derech. It's going to be really difficult for them. Don't do it. So we did, and we made Aliyah during Corona. And thank God my kids are doing great. But basically, since moving to Israel, I kind of live and breathe Olim teenagers for 3 different reasons. Number one, and this I'll talk a little bit more about, I'm the Menahelet of Olpanat Orly, which is a school in the Beit Shemesh area, which has kids really from across the country who come to our school. It's a school that's for 7th to 12th grade, Anglo girls. Some of them make Aliyah into the school, and some of them grew up in Israel, but to Anglo parents and are more comfortable in an Anglo environment. Our classes are in Hebrew, but with bilingual teachers who really understand the Anglo culture. So I'm going to speak a little bit more about that. But I'm also, when we met Aliyah, I became an administrator on different WhatsApp groups to help Olim. So I mean, a lot of people are making Aliyah through that. And then lastly, after the war, I started something called From Faces of Aliyah. If anybody is on there, which really profiles a number of families who have chosen to make Aliyah. And basically, between all of that, I can tell you that if you're not thinking about making Aliyah right now, you're going to be one of the few people who are left behind, because I spoke to a good 20 families just this summer alone. We're planning to make Aliyah next year with teenage children. All of my college roommates have made Aliyah within the past 3 years, and many of them didn't want to make Aliyah beforehand. When I spent my year in Israel, I didn't have any family members to spend Shabbos at, and thank God now most of my family lives in Israel right now. My brother lives in Hempstead. You can try to convince him to join us. But really, almost everyone in my family is here. All my friends are here. I have not been back to America to make Aliyah. I really don't have any people to go back for. People are coming to Israel. We speak on a constant basis to rabbis, to principals, many people that you don't know who are in the process of making Aliyah. People are coming. And I think that there's a lot of challenges to teens Aliyah. But the reason why many people are coming with teenagers right now is because things have changed. So firstly, I just want to tell you some of the challenges, because I think it's always really important to be honest about the challenges to face. and then talk about some reasons why it's worth coming anyway, and some ways they open up early phases, some of those challenges, and some other schools as well. So first of all, some of the challenges that come with teen Aliyah. Obviously, language. Jewish day schools in America, as much as you pay for tuition, they're not teaching your kids Hebrew. Very rarely does the kid who's coming from some of the best schools, rarely are they fluent in Hebrew. And unfortunately, here's a lot of kids who could have been the smartest kid in the class in America. They come to Israel and all of a sudden they lose their self-esteem because they don't even know who they are. They're hearing someone speak in Hebrew and they don't understand what's being said. Even if they understand the language, the culture is different in Israel. The accents that teenagers have, self-esteem challenges, and to hear everyone else rattle off in Hebrew with the Israeli race and they don't have it, that's difficult. Classes are larger in Israel than they are in America. They're leaving behind their friends. When you're a teen, that's everything. The curriculum is very much focused on the Bagrut, which is the matriculation exam, and therefore it leaves less room to be inspiring. And the hashkafic boxes are often very different here in Israel. So with all the challenges that I mentioned, why is it worth coming to Israel? And I would really say that it comes down to arachim, it comes down to values. Again, I've taught in America for many, many years and all across America, and I teach in Israel. And I can tell you the values here are just different. Kids are wholesome here. Kids have something to live for here. It's not about branding here at all. Kids have a certain value here. And we saw that on October 7th. The kids were so focused on their cell phones. They're like, oh gosh, the TikTok generation, are they really going to defend our country? And they did. They ran to the battlefield to defend us. And it wasn't just, Israelis. It was also kids who grew up in America but said, I want to spend my life in Israel. And they really live for a certain value that you just don't have when you're outside of Israel. I was actually at a shir on Shabbat where it was mostly Israelis. And they turned to us and they said, what is it like for you as Anglos to choose to live here? Your kids wouldn't even know about all the things that are going on here if you had not made an Aliyah. And I said to them, but it gives my kids such a strength, such a resilience that you don't have if you stay in America. And we saw that this morning for anybody who did not read their news. This morning at 6:32, many of us were woken up to sirens. In Beit Shemesh, we didn't have them, but across the country they did. And no one knew, why are there so many sirens across the country? What exactly is going on here? And I woke up all my children because there were really sirens all across, watching the news. And on the news, they're saying, there's rockets, you don't know what's going on. And my son said to me, is there going to be school? He's 10 years old. And I said to him, I don't know, we'll see. And within 20 minutes, oh, it was one missile. Don't worry, thank God it was taken down. Hashem does decent for us in this country. And 20 minutes later, all the kids are getting ready to go to school. Everybody's going to work, and there's traffic all over the place because the country moves on. This country gives our kids resilience in a time where kids don't have resilience, and it gives them values. And for that alone, it's worth moving to Israel. Our kids in Israel are a totally different caliber than anywhere else in the world. So let me tell you about some things that Open Out Early, my school, does that really helps teenagers. Not only Open Out Early, many schools have a lot of Olim, depending on where you move, certainly in Beit Shemesh, but I'll tell you something that Open Out Early has that other schools don't. Number one, we have small classes, which means that we give a lot of attention to our kids. There is no such thing as falling through the cracks, which unfortunately happens in a lot of Israeli schools. Our students do not fall through the cracks. We know everybody's name on the first day of school. If they're not there, we're reaching out to them. We're reaching out to their parents. A lot of parent communication, which is something that's unusual in Israel. Our staff are all do Sfati. They all speak Hebrew and English, and not Hebrew like I think. They really speak Hebrew 100% fluently. They're able to teach in Hebrew, but explain things in English. They're able to hang out with kids after class in English with their tarbut, within their culture. And they definitely focus on inspiring the kids, which is not always muvan elav as an understood thing here in Israel. You have an Olim Maslul, which means that the big bad Bagrut that everybody's so afraid of, a lot of Olim, if you make Aliyah at a certain age, you get a lot of what's called hakalot, leniencies. And it's one thing to get a leniency on the test, but we teach towards that. We have separate chapters. And therefore, we're able to help our students be able to prepare them properly for the Bagruts. All of the girls come from Anglo backgrounds, although most of our students are not Olim. Again, some are. We have a good 7 Olim who came straight off the plane into our school this year. We also have a lot of kids who just grew up in Anglo backgrounds, which means that they're as comfortable speaking English as they are in Hebrew. And when a kid is using that resh, which is a little too American, no one's laughing at them because their parents have that same resh and they're very familiar. And kids literally walk into our school after making Aliyah and make friends within the week. They don't feel different. They don't feel weird. It's a familiar culture. They're learning in Hebrew, but it's la'at la'at. They're doing it in a piece that works for them, so it's not so overwhelming. So they're not saying, I don't want to go to school tomorrow because I'm so overwhelmed. They're happy to come to school. They come in and they make friends quickly. And lastly, we really focus on making sure they feel this connection to Eretz Yisrael. We take them on hikes. We teach them about the miracles of Hakamat Medina that to some Israelis, they're just so used to. But to us Americans, we remind them, this is why it was worth the sacrifice to make Aliyah. And I can tell you that of all of my students, not one wants to go back to Chutz La'aretz, even if had families. But the families themselves have decided to go back to Chutz La'aretz, and the kids have chosen to stay behind in Eretz Yisrael because they feel so happy in Israel now. And that's a lot of what our school is doing. If you have teenagers, you're thinking, no, we missed the time, we can't make Aliyah, you still can, not just because of our school, but other schools really make that possible. And I speak to many, many people who are interested in making Aliyah. I made Aliyah as a principal, my husband was a shul rabbi, we came with teenagers, we came with the whole baggage. Anybody who wants to talk with him, I'm more than happy to. So that's everyone.
Thank you very much, Ariela. And let me ask Rabbi Freedman to pick up the mic.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on again. Privilege and honor, pleasure. So a lot of people say, I'd love to make Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, but what am I going to do about the chinuch of our children? Where am I going to find the chinuch that I could identify with hashkafically, academically, educationally? Where are they going to service my children? Well, guess what? That might have been a great question 25 years ago. Baruch Hashem, over the last 25 years, the Metzias has changed. And now the reason to make Aliyah is the chinuch your children are going to get in Eretz Yisrael. Let's just talk about for a second Yeda. Let's just talk about bottom line Yeda, how much your children will know growing up in any cheder here in Eretz Yisrael, just the amount that they know Chumash, almost Baal Peh by the time they're in 4th or 5th grade. They're able to read through a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch or a Mishnah Berurah by 3rd and 4th grade. They're fluent in Hebrew. The amount of Mishnayos they know, hundreds of Mishnayos Baal Peh. The way they could read through a Mishnah, you have to explain the difficult words in the Mishnayos, of course, but the Mishnah is written in Hebrew. They could read through his Mishnah as long as you explain to them the difficult words. Then they come to the Gemara, so if they know all these Mishnayos and they know a lot of Chumash, guess what? Gemara will be much easier. You're able to already in the 5th grade learn a whole parak of Gemara in our 5th grade, Elam Metzias. We give them a test on the entire Elam Metzias. Shaka V'Tayir Baal Peh. This is basics in every single cheder. By the 6th grade, they do the whole Hamafkid and Akoines. Any basic cheder in Eretz Yisrael, the kids are learning Gemara on a much faster track than their counterparts in America. They're just in basic Yeda, the amount of Mishnayos, Chumash, Gemara that a child knows growing up in Eretz Yisrael far surpasses their counterparts, their cousins who are back in America. Also in terms of Tahara. They're living amongst from Jews, most of them, and let's say in Ramat Beit Shemesh, and there's a tahara that our children grow up with, a kedusha that they grow up with, that they're not in amongst the goyim, they're not in amongst the. I grew up in New York City. The New York City buses are rolling down the streets with these huge advertisements you can barely even look at. It doesn't happen in Ramat Beit Shemesh. They're growing up with the tahara, with the kedusha that their cousins back in America don't have, and also in terms of Gashmias. Obviously, wherever you go, there's kids who have more and kids who have less. But Eretz Yisrael, even the kids who have more have less than their counterparts back in America. Just because the way people live, the salaries here are much simpler. The amount of time we spend driving our car all the way until the car is finished, giving every single last kilometer that it can to us. We don't flip out our car every 3 years. It doesn't work that way in Eretz Yisrael. You drive it until its last breath. So you have people living much, much simpler with much, much less than their counterparts in America. And the amount of Gashmias that you see here in Eretz Yisrael is much, much less, a much more simpler, much simpler life than the way we were raised back in America. So in terms of Torah knowledge, in terms of Tara, Kedusha, Gashmias, the amount of Ruchnias we have here in Eretz Yisrael, it's the reason to make Aliyah. Your children will be much more tamim, much more pure. Obviously within reason, within parameters, but that's the way it is. And then you'll be proud of the way they're being raised. And then you have that certain amazing pride that you have in children that are raised here in the education system here in Eretz Yisrael. Of course, in order to make Aliyah and find the right education system, you have to do your research. We recommend very, very strongly that you make a pilot trip. There are lots of schools. Over the last 25 years, a lot of schools, Chadarim in Ramat Beit Shemesh, as well as Yerushalayim, other areas, are catering to Olim I have my own cheder. It's Talmud Torah Darchei Noam in Ramat Beit Shemesh. We're starting our 17th year. Yes, Rabbi Bloom's grandchildren are in our cheder as well. We just heard from Mrs. Davis. She has a co-principal, Mrs. Klein. Her sons are in our cheder as well. So we have a cheder that is primarily for Anglo Haredim who have made Aliyah and want that warm, caring atmosphere where their children will be nurtured, where midos and derech eretz are paramount, where obviously Torah is the most important. We also have very, very strong secular studies in the afternoon, limudei chol, as they say, English, science, math, etc., here offered in Ramat Beit Shemesh. So Baruch Hashem, we have our cheder that caters to Anglos. There's also at least 5 or 6 others that in Ramat Beit Shemesh and many others as well as in Yerushalayim. Do your research. Find the cheder or the school that's right for you. Don't speak to just one person. Speak to a few different people and make a pilot trip and make appointments to speak to each school and to spend time at each school and find the right shidduch for you. Try to match yourself hashkafically when you make Aliyah. Aliyah is hard enough. Don't also move hashkafically when you make Aliyah. If you're a certain way hashkafically, try to match yourself. Don't try to move to the right or to the left. This Aliyah is hard enough. Don't make too many moves at once. Try to match yourself. Have a consistency with the chinuch and the hashkafa that you're giving to your children in your home to that which you find in your child's school. Make sure as much as you can. Everything is a little bit, it's very nuanced, but try to find a consistency. Consistency with the school that you're sending to, the hashkafa that you're choosing, and also try to make a decision as best as you can about how Israeli you want to be. Some people, like for me, I know for me that I want my sons and my Talmidim to be happy, balanced, B'nai Torah, who love to learn and love to go to shul and love to daven and love to do chesed, have a great group of friends and do positive things in their spare time and like to play sports. So you notice I didn't say amongst those things that I need them to be the most Israeli. I didn't say that. I want them to be happy, balanced, B'nai Torah. So that's the most important thing for me. Other people disagree. Other people say, no, I have to integrate into Israeli society as fast as possible. Yesh v'yesh. Figure that out. Talk to your rebbeim, talk to your mentors, talk to the people that you know who made Aliyah already. Try to figure out how fast and how important it is for you to become Israeli right away. What is your tolerance for how Israeli do you want to be? Do you want to send your child to a school where everyone speaks Israel, only Hebrew, and nobody speaks English to your child? Not the Rebbe, and not the principals, and not your classmates? Or do you want to be able to speak to your child's principal in English? Do you want to be able to speak to your child's Rebbe or more in English? Do you want your child to have other children in the class who speak English as well? How important is that to you? Try to figure out this before you come or while you come during your pilot trips. Try to figure that out. Is it important that your child is in a class where all the children are Israeli, no one speaks English? Half and half, 90-10. What's important for you and your child? And come and try to make that research when you're doing your trip. Once you do make Aliyah and you come to your children's school, well, guess what? Israeli schools, no matter what they're made of, are going to be different than the American school that you came from. The American school that you came from, you're probably paying, I don't know, $12,000 a year, $15,000 a year, $20,000 a year, whatever it is. Well, guess what? Let's say you come to my cheder, you're spending about $2,000 or $3,000 a year in tuition. That's it. But where you're coming from, in your American school, you had a principal and a vice principal and an English principal and a Hebrew principal, and you had a resource room director and a school psychologist and a school social worker and a school nurse. Well, guess what? Say goodbye to all those people, because that's not what we have here at Eretz Yisrael. You have a much cheaper tuition, less than $3,000 for the year, but the schools are going to be much more bare bones. They won't have a full-time school psychologist and a full-time school social worker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when you do come to your child's school, if there is any issue, and there might be, come solution-oriented with open hands. Your child needs extra tutoring, come saying, what could I do to pay for my child's tutoring? How can I help my child with this transition or that transition? Come solution-oriented, open-handed. Don't come with demands, as not the Israeli principals don't take kindly to demands very, very often. Come solution-oriented. How can we help? What can we do to make this challenge, to get us through this challenge? So for sure, you should know that over the last 25 years, there are educational institutions, Chadarim, schools, Beis Yaakovs, and the like, that cater to the American Olim who are going to come. They want your children to come. They welcome your children to come. Your children will thrive. They will be educated. They will be nurtured. They will grow as B'nai Torah here in Eretz Yisrael. But please do the research, make the pilot trip, speak to as many people as you can, sit with the principals of the various schools, try to match yourself hashkafically, and when you do come to Eretz Yisrael, come solution-oriented, open-handed, and Be'ezer Hashem, you look back upon this conversation and say, this was the one that did it, and we are so happy that we made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. Looking forward to seeing everybody when they make their pilot trip. If you would like to come visit Talmud Torah Darchanel and Ramat Beit Shemesh, we'd love to meet with you. Batzlacha, Rabbi.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Freedman. The next presentation is around the healthcare professionals. What we're trying to do in different types of webinars in a particular field. Last time we talked about IT, and Michael asked us to focus in on the healthcare professionals, and we're very fortunate to have Rabbi Dr. Menachem Marcus, who is a doctor here now and was also a doctor in Teaneck, New Jersey.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, this presentation really is for people who are physicians and who want to make Aliyah. And I had a practice, a large rheumatology practice in Teaneck for 45 years. I taught in medical school. I was the head of rheumatology at 2 hospitals, and we made Aliyah 9 years ago. So I want to start by saying that there's a huge shortage of doctors in Israel, and you are needed. The average per capita number of doctors in Israel is 10% lower than all the Western countries average. And in 10 years from now, that is expected that we'll have a 20% shortage of physicians, which is a terrible situation since when I was younger, 20, 30 years ago, Israel had the highest number of physicians in the world. So there's a tremendous shortage in various specialties. I'm going to list them very quickly because there's a lot of specialties which are really needed in this country. And I'll start off by saying there's a huge need for psychiatrists. As of 5 years ago, there were 280 psychiatrists short, and with the war situation and the PTSD that occurs with soldiers, there's a huge need for psychiatrists. There's a huge need for neurologists and the other specialties that are needed, particularly, all doctors are needed, but particularly in geriatrics, pediatric neurology, anesthesia, intensive care, general surgery, pediatric surgery, internal medicine, oncology, emergency medicine, pathology, radiology, rehab medicine, neurology again, and in rheumatology, my own field. In Yerushalayim, where I live, there are 2 rheumatologists outside the hospitals to care for 1 million people. 2 rheumatologists. When you want to apply, when you're going to make Aliyah and going to apply for a medical license, the process is not complicated. Nefesh B'Nefesh now has a separate department specifically to help physicians and other healthcare professionals get their license in Israel and to help them through that process to make it easier. Once you get your license is good for 6 months, and then it's renewed, and it's renewed indefinitely. When you apply, you'll find out that you need your original medical school degree certificate, your specialty certificates, and you need the original copies and other information, but it's not a difficult process. When you start practicing in Israel, you have lots of choices. You can practice for the kupot, you can practice in private practice, you can practice in hospital care. Personally, I'm working only part-time now, but I work in the kupot, in one of the kupot, and I also have a private practice. I can't speak too much about the hospital-based physicians, although I have to tell you that there's less shortage in the built-up major cities in Israel than there are in the outlying areas. And there's lots of opportunities for physicians to work in hospitals in the outlying areas. And the outlying areas doesn't mean to travel 2 hours to the hospital. Outlying areas between Yerushalayim and Tel Aviv, there are 4 or 5 outlying areas that desperately need physicians, and in the greater Tel Aviv area and in the greater Haifa area. One of the nice things about practicing in Israel is that you don't need CMEs. There's no one telling you what notes to write, how to write the notes. You get paid per capita if you're working for a kuppah, and if you're practicing privately, you charge whatever you want, which is reasonable. There are lots of conferences which are available here in Israel and in Europe and in the United States. And if you work for a hospital, you generally get your trips to the United States or the European meetings paid for by the drug companies. Age is not a limiting factor in practicing in Israel. I know a number of physicians who've made Aliyah in their 70s and even in their 80s and are teaching in the hospitals and are practicing medicine very productively. Hebrew is not a major factor. My Hebrew has never been great. If you speak Hebrew fluently, that's terrific. I learned very quickly medical Hebrew, and I can converse with my patients fairly well, and they can understand me, and I can understand most of what they're saying, so it works out okay. After you start practicing, everybody has to do histaklut, which means you have to have an observation period. It doesn't mean you have to do a residency all over again. It means if you're in a clinic, you start working, and 6 months later, the head of the clinic reports that you're a great doctor, and he signs a form, and that's it. If you're working in the hospital, the same thing. Even if you're a senior physician in the United States or a professor, you go through this process. It's a pro forma process. Sometimes it's a 6-month period. Sometimes it's a 3-month period. And the person in charge basically signs off on you, and it's not a big deal. Many people ask me, why should I leave my practice in New Jersey, New York, any place where I'm making a lot of money, very comfortable financially? Why would I go to Israel? The doctors make a fraction of the amount of money. Well, first of all, doctors in Israel live comfortably. Some live very comfortably. I won't tell you how much doctors make, but they will certainly make in the 6 figures, and some doctors make in the 7 figures. The difference between living as a doctor in the United States and living in Israel is similar to what Rabbi Freedman said before. You leave a lot of the gashmis behind. In the United States, I had a Lexus. I lived in a beautiful house, beautiful community. People don't need that here. People don't need fancy cars. They don't need big mansions. They leave a lot of the gashmis behind. As one of my sons who's making Aliyah, planning to make Aliyah, said to me, he said, Americans buy a lot of stuff. You don't need a lot of stuff here. People have less stuff here, less fancy cars. They live comfortably in homes, and they're happier. They're happier. Practicing in Israel is a tremendous zechus for me. I get brachos from my patients every day. Taking care of patients who are your compatriots, your fellow citizens living in the Jewish state, from all different walks of life. I've such wonderful rabbis I take care of, and their families, and secular Jews, and some Arabs. It's a wonderful feeling knowing that you're taking care of your people in your land. And there's such a great appreciation by Israelis of Americans practicing here. Number one, because they're practicing here, and also because American doctors practice medicine differently from many Israelis. The interaction between patient and physician is different. There's
Dr. Marcus, you there? I think they might have frozen there. Let's move on to the next topic. which is choosing communities, and it's actually my topic, so perfect timing. Hi everyone, my name is Rafi Shulman. I'm the co-founder of Olim Advisors. We've been helping people make Aliyah for the past 8 years, since 2016. What I'm going to talk about is finding the right community, and I think that's so critical to the process of making Aliyah, to the thought process of making Aliyah, because at the end of the day, the community that you choose is most likely going to determine how successful or happy you are in Israel. It's not the be-all and end-all. People very often make Aliyah to one community and they move. But what we do and what we recommend is that people spend a lot of research, a lot of time beforehand to find the right community for themselves, and if they have kids, for the kids as well, because it just sets you up for success. And so there's a few things to keep in mind as you are researching communities, looking for communities, and I'll just go through them here quickly. The first one is really having a budget in mind. If you want to live in Yerushalayim and you can't afford Yerushalayim, it doesn't make sense for you to focus in Yerushalayim. If you want to live in Tel Aviv, the same thing applies. And so put together a budget, have a rough idea of what you can spend, whether you're buying or renting, right? That will really help you eliminate some of the communities that might be too expensive for you. Once you've done that, then you want to make a list of preferences that you, your spouse, your kids want. And that can range from a lot of the different things that were mentioned already today. It could be an Anglo community, it could be an Israeli community, it could be a mixed community, it could be a religious, a secular, could be a large city, it could be a shuv. Maybe you've always wanted to live by the beach. And one of the things that we tell people is that when you make Aliyah, it's an amazing opportunity to start a new chapter in your life. So if you've always wanted to live by the beach, or if you always want to live in an open space, or if you wanted to live in the city, the center of town, making Aliyah gives you that option. So make a list of preferences, but recognize that in all likelihood, you're not going to find communities that check all the boxes. So you make the preferences, prioritize your preferences, and that will really help you kind of drive the research and your decisions. What I also encourage people to do is to be open-minded. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of established communities, Ramat Bet Shemesh and Modi'in and Yerushalayim and Ra'anana, a lot of established Anglo communities, and all of those are wonderful communities. But there are a lot of other options as well. There are a lot of communities and yeshuvim that are popping up, that are growing, that you might never have heard of before. And if that's what you're open to and that's what you're looking for, then cast a wider net. When you do the research, I always tell people, start with a very wide net. You can always eliminate things, eliminate options from your list, but consider yeshuvim, whether it's in the Gush or up north or down south. Also look at other communities that maybe you think are too Israeli. For example, Rehovot, a lot of people think is a very Israeli city, but there's a wonderful American shul, the Berman shul in Rehovot. There's a wonderful Anglo community in Rehovot, a neighborhood in Rehovot. So when you do the research, really spend the time and the effort to come up with a very exhaustive list, and then you can always work backwards from there. And as Rabbi Freedman mentioned, doing a pilot trip is so important. We did a pilot trip for a family that was making Aliyah, and they were interested in 3 communities. And what we did is we planned the pilot trip for them. This family had 7 kids, and the husband was coming for about 10 days. In that span of 10 days, they checked out 3 cities, they checked out 15 schools. So we scheduled 15 appointments at 15 different schools in the 3 communities. They went around with realtors to see what the housing looks like and what the options are and prices. And so if you can come on a pilot trip for a week, for 10 days, definitely I highly encourage you to do it, because there's nothing like meeting people in person. There's nothing like seeing things with your own eyes to really help you understand what you like and what you don't like and what's most suitable for you. So this is just really a tip of the iceberg in terms of choosing communities. If you're thinking about making Aliyah now or down the road, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you. We have a wonderful staff of advisors that can really guide you and help you make this decision. And then most importantly, once you get to Israel, also support you and help you adjust and acclimate, so you're not just thriving and you're not just surviving in Israel, but you're really thriving in Israel. And that's why we're here together, to really help you with this journey. So great meeting you. And Paul, I'll turn it over back to you.
Okay, let me pass on to Rabbi Golden. He's working on a really exciting program with the National Council of Young Israel, actually finding communities who are opening themselves up to the Anglo population.
Hey, hi everybody. Once again, a real pleasure to be here. I continue to get inspired each time I come to one of these. Remind myself why we're here. Sometimes the day-to-day grind, but it's been wonderful. And so, excuse me, I'm a little bit under the weather. But basically, I just want to reiterate one thing, and I'm not going to take a long time because you've heard a lot, and I don't want to repeat too much. But what I want to just highlight is that from my impression as someone I made Aliyah about 17 years ago, this summer was 17 years, and someone who's kind of kept a bit of a pulse on the Olim communities throughout those 17 years. One thing that I've noticed in the last between 5 and 8 years is the tremendous growth of the support system for Olim communities. And by Olim communities, I mean major, what we would call main Olim centers, and also continued growth of other Olim communities. The support system, the amount of organizations, whether it's Nefesh B'Nefesh growing in the wonderful services they provide both pre and post Aliyah, whether it's the growth of some of the great great organizations we're going to hear from, like NCSY or other things that are providing that framework for teens that make Aliyah, whether it's the schools we heard from that are specific to Olim, and I would even add support within schools that aren't specific to Olim continues to grow. And what's happening is just that as more and more, this is what I wanted to focus on, is Baruch Hashem, the amount of Olim, specifically Anglo Olim, over the last 10 years or so has grown tremendously, and the interest continues to grow. And what I think people need to realize is that the infrastructure of support that continues to be built here is really something that is tremendous and is really able to provide in different ways for different people. And therefore, it's very important to take advantage of all these different opportunities as much as you can. One example of an organization that's looking to continue to provide more support and infrastructure is Mizrachi Young Israel Schools Network. Mizrachi Young Israel Schools Network is a relatively new project with the goal of trying to connect all the different Olim communities all over Israel, enabling the leaders, the rabbis and the lay leaders of those communities to connect with each other, to support each other, to share notes, to be able to help create a framework for them to, both of the rabbis, and eventually, Bezrat Hashem, we're looking forward to moving towards the Rebbitzins to help that, and the lay leaders of the shuls to enable them to share with each other, support each other, and continue to grow. The more that these communities can share what's similar about them and support each other, that can only help strengthen the Olim communities. And our hope is, Be'ezrat Hashem, through the leadership of the communities, to continue to grow as well in providing more for the Olim communities, and hoping to create a united front that can continue to advocate amongst all the other great organizations, to continue to advocate for the needs of the Olim. And one of the things we wanted to stress here, as Rafi mentioned, which is very, very important, is the importance of recognizing that there's not just what we would call the main Olim centers, but there are a number of wonderful younger, both younger and older. By younger, I don't necessarily mean that the population is younger, but I mean the community itself might be a bit younger. But there are smaller communities that are growing that are not that far from what we would call the main Olim centers, that are more affordable, maybe a little bit different from where you initially envisioned your Aliyah, but yet at the same time they have a wonderful infrastructure and support. And I think we asked two different communities. One is a more Olim center. One I guess what would be considered more of a major Olim center for Modi'in, if I'm not mistaken, Rabbi Sobol, who I think I saw was on here, and Rabbi Felberg, from a more up and coming community. It happens to be that for a family reason, I was in Harish for the first time about a month ago. I was shocked by the infrastructure. I was shocked by how much has been built already. Again, for a place that's considered to be up and coming, it had a lot that already was there, which was really amazing. And we encourage you to really, like Rafi said, to think bigger about what your options are, and not to automatically rule things out just because of things that you've heard.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Golden. And let me introduce Rabbi Sobol from Modi'in.
He just joined us, so he should be on now.
היי, שלום, שלום לכולם. So, I'm the only Israeli in this Zoom. So, first of all, it's very exciting to me. I have a what to say about what I heard in the Zoom, but I just will be focusing on Modi'in. Modi'in is one of the common places that Olim Chadashim are coming. In Modi'in, I live in Buchman, rabbi of a big community in Buchman, but there are other neighborhoods in Modi'in that they have a lot of Anglo, like Kaiser, and now also in Nofim there is Anglo, and also Moreshet, there are new neighborhoods. So if someone think about Modi'in, it's not only Buchman like it was in the past. There are many other options in Modi'in itself. Of course, there are many other amazing places out of Modi'in, and the community in Modi'in is very, very welcome. Mamash, we feel as a family, as a big family here. And in Modi'in, the community is what we call classic modern Orthodox. And you will not find almost Haredim in Modi'in. It will be like the classic modern Orthodox. Also the schools in Modi'in, there will be like what we call a Mamlachti Dati or Mamlachti Dati Torani. And so this is more Torah. The school finishes every day at 4 o'clock, not like the other school in 1:30. And but around Modi'in, you have more options. If you live in Modi'in, you can send to Shalbim, to Nof Ayalon. There is Talmud Torah there. There is other options. Also, when we talk about high school, so in Modi'in, you have the classical modern Orthodox Ulpenain school. There are a few options, but out of Modi'in, you have Shalbim. And you know that in Israel, people also in high school send to not only to in the city, they also send to Pnimiyah, to Dormet, to in other places in Israel. It's very common, and we have a big we have many shuls in Modi'in. You have our shul, I think, is the biggest one in Modi'in. It's called Sharei Ona Menachem or Ashkenaz, and we are now almost 400 families. In Israel, it's considered very big. And there are, our shul is running like an Anglo shul. There is a rabbi, there is a president, there is a committee, there is you have to register for Yamim Noraim, and very, very formally, and all the, like you know better than me. And I needed to learn it when I became the rabbi there. So, but I really, no one from the community, from my community hears me now, but I can tell you that I really, really love my community. There are wonderful, wonderful people in the community, and I feel blessed that I am the rabbi of this community, and I think that this represents all Eretz Israel, Baruch Hashem, and I'm talking about the area of Modi'in. It's really, I think that, it's very expensive to live in Modi'in. If someone can afford it, I think it's a very good option to think about. And of course, like everyone says, you need to come to a pilot trip to see the options. But for sure, Modi'in really changed the Anglo community in Modi'in changed the city. Like the city is different. Thank God, I say, to good because of the new Olim. So, no, B'ezrat Hashem, be'atzlacha to all of us.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Sobol. And now, Rabbi Felberg.
Shalom, everybody.
Can you see the presentation? Is it coming across?
Yes, we got it. It's on.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see it on my page as well. So thank you very much to Paul and to Rafi and to everybody for organizing another wonderful webinar like this. As has already been said, it's a massive inspiration to hear the dedication and the will that so many people, the interest so many people have of, coming to Israel and being Yotze the Mitzvah of, Yeshiva Aretz. It's not a small decision to make. And B'ezrat Hashem, we should learn a little bit. I'm learning things every time I come here about different communities as well, myself, and I've already been in Israel kind of 8 years. So it's, it's a real machaya to be here. Thank you. So a little bit, first of all, about the city of Harish, which I'm representing here. Harish is a city, we should really get a map because no one knows Harish yet. So until people know Harish, we should get a map on the screen, I think, next time to show the layout and where everything is. But if you take a map of Israel and you hit Netanya, you go north,
for about 20 minutes, you hit another town called Hadera, and then straight east for about 40 minutes, and you hit Harish. And Harish is really, a very new city, as Rabbi Golden was kindly saying. And Rabbi Golden, I'm so disappointed you didn't give me a call if you were in town. It would be great to meet up with you. It's a growing city, currently about 40,000 residents, but the aim is in the next 5 years, which is very ambitious. They want to turn it into a city of 200,000 residents. And really, when we first bought our apartment in Harish back in, 2017, 2018 now, there was virtually nothing here. There was one neighborhood, a population of maybe 5,000, 6,000 people. And so we've seen this exponential growth happening in a very short time to create a very diverse and very beautiful Israeli city, which really represents every aspect and every, shade of the Israeli community in the terms of having Haredim, having Dati Leumi, Torani families from a secular background. So Harish is a very, what we call Mu'urav place, a place with a great mixture that really reflects every single different shade of Israeli society. One of the big advantages and attractions about Harish is that even though we are a city and we have the full amenities of a city in terms of restaurants, in terms of places to go, things to do, people to, get together with, that sort of thing, we're a close community. We're a community that feels like a city. It's a Yishuv feel in a city environment. So even though you have this, the infrastructure, you also have the very close and community type feel about it. Which brings me nicely onto the Anglo community specifically, which I'm zocher to be the rabbi of. Kialat Derech Eretz is the name of our Beit Knesset, our shul. In many ways, we're the complete opposite of what Rabbi Sobol was talking about. We're a very small community. We're about 60 families strong now. We had a nice boost of Olim coming over the summer and joining our community, joining us in Harish. And we're at the beginning of our journey in the sense that at the moment we daven in the school hall. We, have been given land to build, B'ezrat Hashem, a proper Beit Knesset building on. But the community is a fast-growing one, and it's made up of two major components. Number one is young families, which is to say families who have young children who are under the age of 5, or in fact newlyweds who have not yet had children, and then retirees, empty nesters. And why are these two specific groups coming to Harish? Well, one of the big attractions of the city is its affordability. Because it's a bit more off the beaten track, it's considered to be, less known, although today in Israel, everybody knows somebody in Harish. Oh, my cousin owns an apartment there. Oh, yes, I went there once for some reason. Everyone knows Harish, of Harish. The affordability here is whereby you're going to buy a house in somewhere like Modi'in or in Ra'anana, one of the more traditional Anglo centers. Here you're going to be buying the same thing for a quarter of the price, and that's the kind of the gap there between what you're paying in the more traditional centers and somewhere like Harish, which again is a developing and growing new city. The commuting to the Mirkaz, which is where a lot of people still go for work, is not so unreasonable either. It can be done in 1 hour and 15 from the city if you're going to Tel Aviv. Going to Jerusalem is 1 hour and a half. In most people's roles in the city, the people tend to have flexible working arrangements. So people will work 3 days from the office in Tel Aviv, so we'll pay 2 days from home in Harish or whatever. And then a lot of people have home businesses where they're working 100% remotely or 100% out of their home. And people manage that way. So accessibility to the center isn't really an issue, and there's a lot of public transport links both within the city. So to get around the city itself is quite simple, and then to get out of the city to get to some sort of employment and parnasa, that's quite a possibility as well. Back to the community a little bit. So I'll tell you a story about how the community was formed and what the kavanah, what the intention really was when we built it. When I first made Aliyah with my wife, back in 2016 now, we went to a friend of a friend's wedding. As those of you can tell from my accent, I'm not one of the colonials. I come from the United Kingdom and I grew up in London, not an American. And it was another English family's wedding. They had all flown out for the wedding in Jerusalem. It was a very beautiful wedding. And you can sit down at a wedding table, you're put together with people who you don't know necessarily. And we got schmoozing with this couple. And we had just made Aliyah. Really, a month before that, we had touched down in Israel, and everything was rose-tinted glasses, and everything was wonderful, the beauty of the country. Baruch Hashem, sof, finally, we've come to the Holy Land. And this family had been in Israel maybe for 3 or 4 years, and they were actually making Yerida. They were leaving Israel. They were going back to England. And when I asked them, why are you doing that? They said, we're going back to England find our Yiddishkeit, our Judaism, which I thought was shocking. How can you be lacking your Yiddishkeit in, Medinat Yisrael, in our homeland, in Eretz Yisrael? How could it possibly be someone would go out of Israel to go back to Chutz La'aretz to find the Yiddishkeit? And what I began to understand over my time here is that particularly as Olim, particularly as Anglo Olim, we are used to communities and community structures. Israelis do not necessarily treat communities. It's changing now somewhat, but traditional Israeli society doesn't treat the community as a focus in the same way that Anglos do, whereby you can have the same, couple of people going to the same shul for years and years and years, sitting next to each other, and they never said a word to each other. They have no idea who each other are. People do things with their families. People in Israel have large extended families, and that's their social life. They have friends, they meet at work, or they meet through social events, if they go to the gym or whatever. But the community life of synagogues, what we're used to from Chutz La'aretz, doesn't exist or didn't exist in the same way here now. And one of the wonderful things which Mizrachi is doing is helping communities like ours develop that aspect of religious life, because we believe not only is it good for us as Olim, it's good for Israelis to see what a Beit Knesset can really be, and not just a place where you come to daven, but a full community center where you have full activities, social and religious learning, and a rabbinic support framework to give people what they need for life cycle events, familiarity, guidance. And that's really what the Kehillah is all about here in Harish. We have a full set of, tefillot in terms of religious services over Shabbatot, Yomim Noraim, Yom Tovim in general, weekday shiurim every night of the week. Now we have either women's shiurim, men's shiurim for both men and women, this sort of thing, and lots of social events which have been created through the shul to enable people to get together. And one of the beautiful things as well is people invite. Again, this is something which is not unheard of in Israeli society, but it's less common. People again stick to their families, stick to what they know within their circles. But in Anglo communities, when you meet someone new in shul, what's the first thing you do? You invite them over for Shabbos lunch, you invite them for Shabbos dinner, whatever it is. And we're very good at that, and everyone's always at each other's homes over the course of Shabbatot. And there is that very close-knit community feel, because we're only 60 families, again, in this, growing Israeli town. And the opportunity to form those connections and really feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself, but within an Israeli city, because it's a very Israeli place, is what Kehillat Derech Eretz offers, and is what really, it means to be in Harish. I've spoken already a little bit about the affordability and the potential here. What I'll say is very briefly about the education, that Baruch Hashem, every stream of education really is represented in Harish, and there are new schools popping up every year because the city grows constantly. There are new neighborhoods being set up, new areas being developed. At the moment, we have 5 major neighborhoods in the city. There's an additional 6th neighborhood being built right now, Harish West, as they call it. And so the amenities that are available to you and the schooling that's available will depend a little bit about on the which ezor, which community area you're in, which shchuna you're in, which community or which neighborhood you're in. The more established neighborhoods, like we live here in Choresh, has the full set of opportunities for learning. If you want a Talmud Torah where you want to send your children, a more Haredi style learning, that's there. You want a more Dati Lumi, that's available. You want Mahardal, that's there. Secular schools, we have. Everything is available. It's done in the Israeli style. There are no, I'd say, if you dafka specifically want a Anglo-Israeli experience in education, Harish is not necessarily going to fit that mold. The shul does what it can to fit and to supplement what the schooling does, but it's a very Israeli environment in the schools. That being said, there are 2 schools which provide support specifically for Olim. There's a large Brazilian community as well. Brazilian Olim who come here, so there's Brazilians and Anglos together in additional classes to help them with their Hebrew, etc. So if one was coming with young children who still needed to learn Hebrew in a kind of more, helped environment and a supported environment, again, Harish does have that ability to offer that support and structure to enable them to make your Aliyah a successful one. So, you've probably not heard of us before. You have heard of us. Now you know a little bit more about us. Harish, Kehillat Derech Eretz, as everybody else has already said, if anybody has any questions or comments or insights or things they would like to know more about our community, I'd be more than happy to speak with them after this call and after this webinar, and my contact details are available. But B'ezrat Hashem, everybody who can should be zocher to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Yeshiva Aretz, to come and live here in Eretz Yisrael, wherever they find themselves. And if that's in Harish, we're very much looking forward to having you. Yashar Koach.
Thank you very much, Rav Felberg. And let's let you know, there are dozens of communities like Harish spread out all over Eretz Yisrael. And one of the things that we'll be more than happy to do is help you find what the appropriate community may be for your particular interests. The next subject that we are like to address is healthcare in Israel. And Dr. Aaron will spend a few minutes kind of comparing healthcare in the United States with healthcare in Israel. Okay, she's on mute.
Sorry about that. Okay, you can hear me now? Yeah? Okay. My name is Dr. Eliana Aaron. Thank you very much for having me on. I'm the director of Imitative. I also have a nonprofit now. I am a nurse practitioner, and I have been living in Israel for 22 years. And I have several expertise, including health policy, and my doctoral studies were focused on the populations that fall between the cracks of the Israeli healthcare system. So that's where we are today. Anytime you are an immigrant into a different health system, there are always going to be some gaps that can potentially happen. And there are quite a lot of things that can be done to reduce those gaps and to make the transition smoother. And obviously, there are different types of people who make Aliyah. Some people make Aliyah with young families. Some people make Aliyah when they're older and retiring. Some people make Aliyah when they're terminally ill, and everything in between. So, and basically, it's a very, very wide subject. So I'm going to talk about some of the general changes and differences that people experience when they come here in the system, and as it's experienced by patients. And I'll talk about the costs of healthcare. I'll touch on that a little bit, although it's also complicated. And choosing a health provider is also on the list, but I'm going to talk about the kupot as a component of that. So in general, the healthcare system in Israel is a system of HMOs. There are 4 HMOs, and it's mandatory for every resident of Israel to be a member of one of the kupot. Okay, they're health funds, and the health funds have similar coverage between them in terms of the things that are covered, you know, the healthcare that's covered. They each have different packages, different extra things that you have to pay for. Each of the kupot have different levels. So there's a basic package, which is very inexpensive, and that just covers the things that are required by the government for them to cover. And about 80% of Israelis pay for an augmented program through their kupah, which costs more money. And there's a lot of controversy about that, actually. I'm not going to get into that right now. But that covers more options in certain situations, such as the ability to get reimbursement for private appointments. I'm going to talk about private appointments coming up. The ability to choose your surgeon if you have to have surgery, that's a big deal. And it also covers a higher percentage of medication that's not in what's called the basket of services that's the government mandates to be covered. So in other words, if you get prescribed certain medications, all medications that are in this basket of services are subsidized by the government, and you pay a co-payment, and that comes out of your bank account every month. If a medicine is not covered by the basket of services, then the kupah pay a certain percentage. You're going to pay a much bigger percentage, and if you have the augmented programs, then your percentage may go lower. So there are different benefits, and each kupah has a different scale, but the cost is nominal compared to what people pay for healthcare in America. So basically, you have mandatory coverage. In terms of children, from 0 to 6 years old, all well baby medicine is done in Tipat Chalav, which is either run by the government or by the kupot or by the town or the city that you're in. So it could be run by different organizations. And those don't cost anything. And you go there, that's where you get your vaccines, that's where children get their developmental evaluations, etc. A regular pediatrician doesn't do well baby exams. That's where you go if your baby is sick. Once they are school aged, then the well child care is transferred to the school system, where they have vaccines that are given at different ages. And every so often, nurses will come in and check for scoliosis. But they're not, there's not a regular nurse in any regular school. And basically at that point, they feel like, okay, developmentally, you're pretty much done. In America, doctors still like to do those exams. If you have an American trained pediatrician or a European trained pediatrician, for the most part, they'll probably be happy to do that physical once a year, but it's not done routinely in Israel. So that's something you'd have to ask. You're not going to find out how much your child weighs unless you ask for that age group. In terms of other differences, so as we know from our example from Canada, where people wait a very long time to see doctors, when you have a public health system, the public health system is one where people have to wait to see specialists, especially Dr. Marc has talked about a lot of the shortages. Those shortages can mean that if you're going through the public health system, it could take a year, depending on your location, to see a psychiatrist. Now think about when you need to see a psychiatrist, how bad it is to wait a year. So there are things that can be done in the meantime. There are all kinds of nonprofit organizations for psychiatric care, but I'm giving an example where it could take a very long time through the system to get certain healthcare products or specialists that you need. And that's kind of where the private healthcare system kicks in. So about 60% of the cost of healthcare in the GDP of Israel is actually people paying for private services. And that's to cut the line and to choose their own doctors. It's a reality. If you're in the periphery, and we do need doctors in the periphery very badly, if you're in the periphery, or if you have a need for a specialist that is in the shortages list, let's say, not certain shortages specifically, it could take a very long time to see that doctor. So what people do is they make private appointments to see a private doctor that they choose. Again, your insurance may pay you back for some of it, may not pay you back, depending on the program that you choose. And basically what you have is a situation where there's a short line and there's a long line, and you're putting yourself on the short line by paying money. When you have a private doctor, and this is not for routine care, it's usually for consultations or surgery, that person will, at least for a certain period of time, they'll be in touch with you by email, and it'll be much more personalized. There is no such thing as an on-call doctor in Israel. Like in America, when you have a doctor and something's going on after hours, you call the service pages the doctor. It's not paging anymore, whatever it is now, but and the doctor calls you back. In Israel, the hospital system and the private system are entirely separated. So if you have a problem in the community, I meant not private, but in the community, that doctor doesn't have privileges at a hospital. So that's a totally separate system. And you get to the hospital, they know nothing about you. And when you leave the hospital, your doctor at home knows nothing about what happened in the hospital, because those systems are not connected. So you have to actually make that connection by going to your family doctor, handing the papers and saying, here, this is what happened to me. So that's another difference also, is that your doctor has nothing to do with you going to a hospital. That just like HMOs in the States, the family doctor or primary care doctor is the person who is really navigating the system on your behalf, and they're the source of your referrals and maintaining your prescriptions. In terms of making Aliyah, it's a bit, there is a culture shock a little bit, I'll be honest. It's just a different system. There are wonderful, wonderful doctors here, and the system really does work. You have to know how to navigate it. All of the apps for the Kupot are in Hebrew. The website is in Hebrew. The English websites of these programs are not for Israelis. They're for the tourist program of that Kupa, which is not at all where you want to be. So it could be a bit challenging. And a lot of people end up sort of just going a lot to the office of their local Kupa to get things done. And I think it's important for everyone to learn as best as they can how to navigate the system independently. We spend a lot of time working with people and training them and teaching them what to do. In terms of cost of healthcare, again, the regular basket of services is subsidized, heavily subsidized. Once you're going private, you can get a certain percentage of reimbursement. The other thing is that a lot of people, especially when they make Aliyah and they're younger, they opt to get private insurance as well, which is really good for emergencies. It's really good for unanticipated medical events, because once you have a bad medical event, you can't get the insurance. But also in the event that somebody in your family needs to see a private doctor, have a private test, that is then covered by the private health system if the Kupa is not paying for it, or if there's a differential between those.
Yeah.
So,
Eliana, I'm sorry. We're really way behind, and I do apologize for
no
not
problem.
being. So what I recommend, if people are interested, we can set up a separate call just focusing in on healthcare.
Okay, that'd be great.
We would bring you and maybe some others in to talk. This is a very, very important issue to people of all ages. So
okay,
again,
I'm happy to be available to speak to people also after hours. So thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Marc, do you want to go next?
No, but let's do Rabbi Ginsberg first.
Okay, sure. Okay, so NCSY is a very important organization in Eretz Israel for your children. It's very important in the United States, but it's more important here, as it really is an organization that helps your children integrate into the Israeli society. So, Rabbi Ginsberg, why don't you describe what you guys do?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on, Paul. This is really a beautiful initiative that is not done for the first time. It's something that should really continue in getting the word out. But to those interested in hearing more and really hearing about ways in which to do it. So I'm going to focus obviously on the teenage population, our expertise. I've been here for a long time. We founded NCSY Israel. I'm one of the co-founders and the regional director for NCSY in Israel. We're now going into our 10th year. And I'm not only going to talk about NCSY, I want to speak about obviously what it means to have youths, particularly older youth, teenagers in Israel, and what that means as Anglos, but also as Israelis, because they'll be in both of those boats, as you can imagine. So there's a couple things to understand. I mean, first off, we'll start off with the very fact that it's quite shocking to people that just us, NCSY in Israel, as a youth group for teenagers in Israel, we're actually a monopoly. There is no other youth group for teenagers in Israel. And you might ask, well, what are you talking about? There's Bnei Akiva, there's Sofim, there's Ariel, and et cetera, Ezra, and they're really wonderful youth groups. But in fact, everything starts in this country at a much younger age. Everything is expected to be taken on as a giving back, as a source of leadership at a much younger age, where even, as we know, where 18-year-old, you don't go to college and you're not there yet, you're already expected to give of your life even. You're already expected to join the army. So everything's kind of sped up that much more. Kids are so much more independent in this country, where you have elementary school kids taking buses on their own to school, public buses. So everything's really quick, and therefore youth groups in this country as a whole in the informal setting are actually for elementary school age teens, run by high school age kids. And the high school age kids are therefore running the programming. That's something new to a lot of Anglos. That's something new in general. It's also, let's say, in the English speaking populations, but in Israel, that's not available at all until we opened up 10 years ago. And that's because we opened up for high school kids in Israel to be on the receiving end of things. We believe in general, and we've actually had a lot of Israelis join us as well, that teens are in their prime of developing who they are, what their identity is, and what that's about. And it's very important for them to be in leadership positions and to be giving, but also to be receiving as they receive and develop information. And so we have college age advisors, but they're post-army and post-shirut leumi as a prerequisite, who are developing relationships with them as high school, which is a very different conversation than you might have, you can imagine, with an elementary school kid. But just to understand this concept that everything starts a lot younger here, and that can be a lot of pressure for a teenager. Or number one, there's being a teenager, which is, very hard in general, and then add Aliyah to the mix. Add, you are living in whatever respective community you're coming from, whatever sports team you're coming from, and you might actually be a successful student in school. And now you move into a place where the language is different, the culture is different. Even if it's in the same language, the culture is different. Everything is just different. And therefore, your child might not be successful and feel incredibly hard. It might be incredibly challenging for them, and that also can push on to the family many challenges as well. And so consider that. Now, most teens who are not making Aliyah on their own, as you can imagine, most teens are making Aliyah with a family, and therefore that can be another stressful thing, as teens naturally rebel and like to be independent and have their own decisions. So making Aliyah is another thing which can be very challenging. One of the larger mistakes and challenges that are really made that we see more often, we have hundreds of teens, we've had thousands come through our programming, is that it's a surprise too much. It's too often a surprise where a teenager finds out that they're making Aliyah. Now, parents need to be parents, and parents make the decisions for their families, but have the conversation of let them have a part of that process, whether it's not, maybe another, should we make Aliyah or not? That's your decision as a parent, but well, there's a couple of ways in which you get to take the next step. Here are options for schools. What do you need in order to be successful? Have conversations with your teens before they make Aliyah. And keep them in the process. Don't surprise them. They don't like that. They like to feel like they're in the driver's seat. So give them opportunities to do so. When they come here, it's extremely challenging number in terms of the scholarly aspect as well. So to keep that in mind, particularly from 11th and 12th grade, where there's a concept called Bagriot, which is incredibly challenging. It's hard work here in Israel. Now, it's doable for everyone. I apologize. There's a helicopter, so if that I'm in the south right now. For teenagers to come here and expect to do well is going to be a challenge. So keep those expectations realistic in terms of what you want from them. Consider success as something different. In fact, in a country like Israel, where it's not the same expectation, where if you don't get your undergraduate masters and this and that, you're an unsuccessful person. There are an incredible amount of successful people for jobs which many in the States, let's say, wouldn't ever consider. Things like plumbing and construction are respected jobs here that really successful people have. It's an entire nation of Jews, and every position needs to be filled. So think more outside the box. Give opportunities for your child to have success. So number one, plan together with your teen. Number two is you're also an Oleh. You don't know what's going on. Your teen knows more than what's going on. So ask for help. There are families who have been there, who have grown up, who have had multiple teens go through the system. People are so helpful. They've experienced it. They've gone through the challenges. Talk to them. Don't be shy. People are waiting in line to help you. You can reach out to us. You can reach out to other organizations who specialize in teens. But I recommend to just speak to the parents in your community who have been here for a long time and speak to them. Speak to even their children. Have those conversations. There is so much help to be had. Don't be afraid to ask for help. This is a country where we work together. And that the last bit, and I'll end on this note, is keep in mind that you're an immigrant too, and you're an immigrant, and it's a wild thing because as Anglos, we think immigrants as like, the Russians are coming and the Mexicans to America, but it's strange because we often say, oh, that's for, this type of person or that type of person. I'm not an immigrant, but you are. And that's something that is not something you need to be embarrassed about, because the entire country is made up of immigrants of every shape and size. And that's an incredible opportunity as well. Most people see that as a loss. And in fact, teens see that as wow, that means I'm an outsider, I'm different. But when they notice and see, and when you get to show them that this country is made up only because it has immigrants, that is who we are as a people. There's a coming together of all nations, all the Jews from all the nations, that really is the most empowering part. Teens very wary don't understand this. That's because the parents don't consider it as well. Think of yourself as an immigrant, but from the beneficial side. So plan together with your teen. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Feel free to reach out to us. My information will be public and is public on our website, israel.ncsy.org. And as well, don't be embarrassed about being an immigrant. Be proud. We need you, and your expertise from where you come from and your moral capability is something that the Jewish people are waiting for. So thank you so much, Paul, and I'll pass it to the next speaker.
I thank you very much, Rabbi Ginsberg. The next speaker is Marc Rosenberg from Nefesh B'Nefesh. Nefesh B'Nefesh is kind of the go-to organization when you have questions about Aliyah. And Marc has agreed to answer some of the questions. We got a lot of questions, and he's not going to give a full definition of the answers because many of them require a lot of detailed information from the questionnaire. So, Marc, let me pass it over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Continuing on the blessings and thanks for this event. But following Rabbi Ginsberg, it's hard to say. He really summarized such great information about just general Aliyah advice, which is, I think, really important to really research it and get a plan, really lean into the questions that you're curious about. And the Nefesh B'Nefesh website is full of articles and videos, our YouTube channel, with lots and lots of information. But just take your questions from your Shabbat wondering, you're arguing at your Shabbat table about this or that, to really speak to a professional, get your answers questioned. And I think that his advice about leaning into being an immigrant and just being honest about these things is really, really wonderful advice for everyone, not just if you're bringing a teenager. I would encourage everyone who's thinking about making Aliyah in the next 9 to 12 months to start their application. There's no commitment to filling out the application, but it's good to get a jump start on what you need to get done to find out about your eligibility. It can take time to get all the forms together, so you should really figure that out. And I really want to say that you should really, almost 4,000 people from North America are making Aliyah. I'm speaking to you from Queens right now, where we have over 100 people coming to tidy up their questions and forms and paperwork, getting fingerprinting here, getting things apostilled. It can be a bureaucratic process, but you want to make sure you get ahead of it and make sure that it's as smooth to your integration as possible. One of the things that I was asked to just talk about, we got some questions that came in beforehand, and I just want to try to address on some of them. First of all, there was questions about banking, taxes, and important to realize that there are some general principles that you need to know how taxes work in Israel, but it's important to speak to your own financial concerns. Speak to an accountant to understand how being a U.S. citizen in Israel is going to affect your filing as an American citizen, or if you're leaving Canada and you have Canadian things, that all those create situations. So you should definitely do some tax planning and understand how the 10-year tax holiday on passive income, which is a gift to all new immigrants, would impact you for that passive income, and what it means for potentially selling your home. And that would be something that you need to do. Choosing a bank in Israel is not so difficult. You want to choose something that's convenient, someone that you can communicate with. But it's something that it's a relationship that you have to see also that's going to be able to do the work that you need to. Just also the question came in there about Social Security. Security is never taxed, but you also want to look into all your other sources of income. There was interesting questions about communities for retired people or seniors. Empty nesters, retirees live everywhere in Israel. So you want to see what makes up the ingredients of the community that you're looking for, whether you want to be near the beach, you want a big city or small city. And I encourage you, today's a Sunday. So what on a normal Sunday, if you're retired, what are you going to be doing? You want to look at those items that are going to be able to fill your cup, what's going to make you feel good about the life you're going to live. And more likely that once you start looking into places, there are going to be other people speaking there. Maybe it's an email group or a WhatsApp group that you're going to join and be able to speak to people. And I think that's also a tip that's come up several times during today's webinar. You want to speak to people living in the community to find out what it's like. if there are people like you or people you want to be friends with. Advice we give to parents is, you go to the park in the afternoon and sit with the parents and talk about the schools and kids. So the same thing for empty nesters and retirees when they come in. I also want to see, there's a question here about, there's a question here about, a very interesting question about what's a good location that's a modern Orthodox community with lots of English-speaking people. There's English speakers all over the country, as spoken in the community section here. There's larger concentrations and smaller concentrations. There's big cities. A lot of people move between Beit Shemesh and Modi'in and Gush Etzion and Ra'anana. That's like the triangle of major English-speaking communities around there, which obviously includes places like Modi'in and on the edge like Rehovot. But you have to really, even in places like Jerusalem, there are different neighborhoods that have larger populations and smaller populations. And as was spoken about Modi'in, there's neighborhoods like Kaiser or Buchman. You need to don't just look at the big names, look into the neighborhoods, and that will give you a better sense of both the communities and the people that are living there. Look at another question came here is about subsidy for the first flight for Aliyah. One of the things that the government offers you is a free flight to Israel. They are asking people to opt in whether they want the free flight now. So if people have their own means to pay for the flight, you can do that, but you're still eligible if you need to get a flight to Israel. I'll take maybe a few more here, unless you think, Rabbi Paul.
Keep on going. Keep on going. You're doing great.
Okay. One of the questions that came in here is a process to practice medicine in Israel. We have a great team for any medical licensing. I encourage you to read the article about physicians making Aliyah, and then reach out and speak to the people that are going to help you bring you and make sure all your documents are set up. Usually around March time, there's a special event for medical professionals to make sure that they can almost be pre-approved to practice their medicine in Israel. And I give you that push. The same thing for people looking for jobs. We have an incredible amount of over 80 different articles on professions that you can learn about what it's like to practice in Israel, and then look on our job board for those type of jobs. All this information is on our website, nbn.org.il. There's a question here about facilities available for developmentally disabled people where in Israel. There are facilities all around the country. The question is really for people whose Hebrew isn't so strong and where you're going to live. And I encourage you can reach out to me directly or just to our advisors. There's a list of those type of facilities. The Nefesh B'Nefesh team really realizes that everyone needs an individual plan and the resources. In essence, like 80% of the information is the same for everybody about the forms you need and the questions you need to sign up for it. But really coming into the 20% of the questions that you really need to fine tune is a big part of the decision to make Aliyah. And I guess I'll close with this, is that there are two elements to this. One is, can you make Aliyah? There's the technical forms that you have to get together that you'll be able to get your visa and you'll get approved for it. And that's important for people to prepare for, because it does take time. And there are changes that have gone into effect specifically because of identity theft. And a lot of the documentation that people are asked for is to certify because there have been identity theft for people who have been fraudulent with the system. But there also a big part of it is really about not is when or should you make Aliyah, and that comes to other questions of finances and timing and family, and are you spouse on the same same page about what you want to do, and that really takes time in talking out those problems. So I want to conclude by saying that I encourage you to keep on exploring your Aliyah and take this form and watch it again, to reach out to the many wonderful people that offer their assistance here today. And please reach out to the talented team at Nefesh B'Nefesh that's going to be able to help you start the process and bring you through the process. But the process doesn't always end at the airport. Your Aliyah doesn't end at the airport. In fact, it's a little bit misnomer that you just you cross the finish line when you land in Ben Gurion and you get off the plane and there's that sign that says Mazal Tov Olim and your name's on it. It's really a wonderful moment. But my blessing to you, my bracha to you, is that you should always be Ba'aliyah. And especially at this time where we're feeling both a sense of sadness and pain in Am Yisrael, as we're still almost in the 11th month of this difficult war, and as we turn the calendar to come almost on a year, but more importantly to the new year, we turn for a prayer of hope, and there should be a year of Aliyah, just not physically for people coming to Israel, but for Am Yisrael, that we should have that spirit of lifting us higher and hopefully to a place of shalom and hatzlacha.
Thank you very much, Marc. So let me just conclude with some of the next steps that we'll be doing. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we'll be setting up a WhatsApp group of the people who have actually been on this, have registered for this call. You'll be getting a copy of the recording. There'll be a questionnaire, which will be extremely important to help us improve the presentations. I did a very poor job of being a hatchet man, so I apologize to those people. Most of you actually stayed on, so I apologize for not containing some of the wonderful information that was coming from the speakers, but I was so impressed with the amount of information that I felt very sad to try to cut them off. Michael Mandelstam will actually be working in the West Hempstead community, and anyone who wants to work with Michael in setting up ongoing meetings, you're kind of creating an Aliyah Chabura within West Hempstead, where it'll be your meeting. You'll decide what type of issues you want to address. We will help you identify content and speakers to address some of the issues that you may have. Again, I'd recommend to reach out to Michael. You could also reach out directly to me and Marc Kaplow, who's in the United States right now, who's one of our contacts. If there are people from other communities who would like to do a similar program for your community, please reach out to me and we'll be more than glad to set something up. It should be very noted that there are many communities that are actually moving to Israel as a group. And I know of at least a half a dozen of those communities, like from Yarley's, Pennsylvania to Afula. There was a group from Lakewood, New Jersey to Beit Shemesh. There was a big group from Deal who went to Netanya, from Teaneck around Beit Shemesh. From Springfield, New Jersey to Karnei Malachi. And I just saw something today about a community from Long Island who's moving as in a large group, an Iranian community who's moving in a large group to Eretz Yisrael. So something you may want to think about. And as you kind of create this chabur, that's one of the discussion items that you may bring up. What are the implications of creating a West Hempstead community within Eretz Yisrael? Anyway, again, I thank everyone for all their time. I look forward to interactions. We will be answering the questions more formally that have been submitted. And again, I wish you all a chasiva tova. Have a wonderful new year. It should be a year of good health and mazel and peace for all of us on both sides of the ocean.
Shana tova, Shavua tov.